Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back to another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I am really excited to have with me today someone who is a leader that you all are going to learn so much from. Peter Bissonnette, welcome to my show.
Well, thank you so much, Meredith. It's great to be here with you.
You know, I'm just thrilled to have you with me, Peter, and I know that my listeners are going to get so much, already I know this, from our conversation. Let me tell them a little bit about who you are before we jump in. Peter is the former president of Shaw Communications, Inc., one of Canada's leading telecommunications companies. With more than 3 decades of experience in the cable, internet, and media industries, Peter played a pivotal role in transforming how Canadians connect and communicate. He's recently published a very inspiring memoir. I highly recommend you pick up a copy of it, called Count on Me, where he shares the lessons that defined his life and career. In reading his book, I learned that Peter is not just an exceptional leader, he's a remarkable human being. You're sure to be inspired by this man. He experienced unbelievable adversity and trauma as a boy, and then he created a life that's grounded in integrity, empathy, and trust. So, Peter, tell us parts of your journey that really had a strong impact on you. You've had so many diverse experiences, both in your childhood and then in your early careers, that have shaped who you are. And I would love for you to share elements of those that led you to create the person you are.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I'm flattered by that. One of the constant kind of pieces of feedback I used to receive is, Peter, you have experienced so many different aspects in your life, and you've gone to different corners that one would not anticipate. You should write a book. And so, when I look at how life has basically shaped me, I start off with the foundational kinds of experiences. I was in a monastery for 4 years, for instance. And when I was in that monastery, I think as close to having a vocation as I think I've known anybody to, was a period of 4 years where I really truly felt that I could basically be a better person and bring something wonderful to the world. That vocation, I determined, early on, wasn't really my calling. And so, but the things that I learned in that 4 years in a monastery were, I talked about the parable of the talents and the gifts that we're given as human beings, and how we can, if we can make the most of those gifts, even though they aren't all equal, if you can work on those gifts and appreciate them, you can be a better person in time. And one of the lessons or one of the models I think that was really important to me was the Good Shepherd. And the Good Shepherd was a very simple picture. When I see a Good Shepherd and he's out in the evening with his flock, and his whole role is to ensure that the sheep are safe and that they survive the night, and ensure that whether there's wolves or whatever vermin out there that are going to threaten them, that my role is to ensure that they can sleep in a safe kind of environment. So when I became a leader, there were many things I said to myself: is I will never treat somebody as my mother or father did. So I have an opportunity to have learned from the I'll call it the tougher kind of childhood in terms of feedback. I have an opportunity to be better because of that. The Good Shepherd gave me that sense of purpose as a leader, is really ensuring in whatever the environment is. So in ours, it happened to be in a very large telecommunications company. And there were staff that worked in engineering call centers and those types of environments. And I made I was ensuring that irrespective of where they were working, that they could work in safety, that they enjoyed the work that they were, doing on our behalf, and that they felt requited from the work that they did. And if there were issues and they do come up in workplaces, that I was seen to be able to manage those, and which I did. I was very proactive in terms of that. So the Good Shepherd really created for me a modeling of how one aspects of a leader, which is sort of the caring side of the leadership and the protective side of leadership.
The whole caring part to me was such a strong theme throughout your whole book. And I thought back to when you were a young boy and you didn't sense that caring from either of your parents. I'm curious, how did you discover this is really a key element that's going to make a difference in how I interact with others in the world?
Well, even at 4 years old, I knew that there was something wrong about the way that my parents were relating to me. I had five sisters and a brother, and even amongst siblings, they were aware that Mummy seems to be favoring Paul over Peter. And when she talks to Peter, she talks in a very different way. And so, and I understand now in retrospect that there, she was going through kind of things like postpartum. It was, the world came at her in a way that I don't think she ever anticipated as a 21-year-old girl living in England. And this Canadian Army guy comes over and all of a sudden whisks her off to Canada away from her homeland. And then next thing you know, as a good Catholic lady, she had 8 children or 7 children, all within 10 years. I can't imagine how tough that would have been to have gone through all of those changes. And so I realized that she didn't really, there wasn't a, she didn't mean, to be that way. She just physiologically was by what was going on. And so because I could see how she was with some of the others. So there was something about me and her. And I was maybe a little bit rambunctious. Who knows? I was curious. And, but I did learn about ensuring that I never treated somebody like that, so I used to say this to our people at work, if you can find one good thing about a person, you would be amazed at how that can turn into 2 and 3 and 4 things if you're mindful about finding something really good about somebody. And we all have idiosyncratics, about our personalities, but to find one. And working in the industry that I did, we had people working in engineering and accounting, all kind of different focuses on creative versus kind of logical approaches to things. And so there might be an immediate reaction to somebody who's an accountant that's kind of dry as toast. But I say, no, look for the life and the vitality in that person as well. And you'll find it if you actually probe and if you actually engage in conversations. And so recognizing there is something wonderful in each of us. I mean, the individuals, frankly, are all contributing to the successes that we enjoyed as leaders in the company. And so appreciate that and look for it and encourage that kind of, if you will, meaningful kind of engagement with them.
Mm-hmm. I just think that thinking of leaders in their roles to be able to express what you just did, have that as their own internal belief as they're interacting with the diverse personalities, either on their team or in the organization. One of the things that I also noticed is that you did hold other positions after you had you served in the military besides going to the seminary, and then you took different jobs in the communications field. It felt to me as I was reading about your landing there at Shaw, because you were there for 35 years,
Yes.
that you kind of felt like you were coming home. It was a comfortable, aligned with your values kind of place. Talk about J.R. Shaw and what you saw in him that attracted you and kept you there.
Wow. JR is probably one of the most significant people in my life. I, when I came to Shaw, it was like my whole life had been a practice for that.
Mm.
There was this unbelievable respect that they afforded me in terms of appreciating what I could do to be a part of their growth story and a part of their family. I mean, this was truly a family company. The J.R. Shaw was the founder. Carol Shaw, who just passed away 2 weeks ago, was the matriarch and the supporting wife of J.R. They had 4 children. Jim Shaw was the CEO he was the senior vice president of engineering and operations when I started with the company, but welcomed me almost like a brother. We kind of crossed paths within the industry, and my coming to Shaw was almost a divine intervention. So I had worked my whole life to be ready, if you will, for the challenges that Shaw was presenting, but also to work with mentors. JR was a mentor. I had had the pleasure in the military and in BC Tel of having people that exhibited that mentorship in a way that I just described. They found one good thing about me, and so with JR, I remember Heather, for instance, when I first did my first or second day at Shaw, she embraced me and said, "Am I happy that you're a part of our family?" And I went, "Holy doodle!" And she had just graduated as an MBA from university in London, and was well on her career path as well, and so it was a significant part of the family. So there was this overall welcoming. JR set the tone when he put his hand out to welcome you. He looked you right in the eye, and he was a cattle farmer, so he was used to rough and tough work. He was working in the pipe business before he founded our company, and the pipe business being in oil and gas in Alberta and Sarnia, Ontario. And he, through his own entrepreneurial kind of vision, said, "There's only one channel or 2 channels available in Edmonton. What can I do to make this better?" And so his mission was to start to provide services to customers that were unavailable in Edmonton. They were available in the US, they were available in Vancouver because they were close to the US and we had cross-border channels. But so he welcomed me, and they were very precise. Jim said to me, "The reason that we want you to work with us is we want to grow our company. And we believe that you're the right person to be a part of this family to grow the company." Whereas in the industry at the time, there were many small family companies that were finding the competition was too much, or the cost of investing in the business was too much, or they didn't feel they really were doing the kind of job they could do in terms of customer care. And so they made choices to move on, and they sold their companies. They made it very clear at Shaw that we weren't that. We were not sellers. We were going to grow this company, and we were going to grow it right. And JR, he didn't just stick the silver spoon in his boys. They had to start from the bottom. They had shovels, and they were doing construction. They worked in customer service as customer care staff. So they appreciated the business in a way that not many could do. I had been through the same kind of path in my career. I mean, I started from the bare bottom when I was in the Air Force. I learned a trade. Learning to me was like a gift from God, that if we have the opportunity to learn and to, better ourselves and make, ourselves much more accommodating, if you will, or ready for, challenges, take every advantage for, to learn. And so, in the Shaw family, they first of all, they very openly designated that I had a role within the company, and they were consistently reinforcing that as we started acquiring more cable systems. And they put more challenges in front of me that I think the book called Count on Me, when somebody trusts me with the kind of responsibilities they did, I said, "I will never let you down. You can count on me." And that was a foundational kind of value that I never, ever wanted to stray from. And it reinforces the relationship that we had with the family. People go, "How does Peter Bissonnette, the only non-Shaw in sort of senior management, how did he get to be where he was?" And I think one of the important aspects that you mentioned was humility. JR was a very humble person. He was humble in terms of even the way he expressed the role of employees. That we are all created equally. We just have different roles and responsibilities, but we all share a similarity in terms of our value to the company. We just do different things. And he would say to me, if I could put smiles on the faces of our employees, that would give me the kind of feedback that I wanted as a founder of this company, that people can actually create families and make their way in life by working in his very humble company. And so he modeled himself after his father, and he was like a father figure to me. And his two sons, Brad and Jim, were like, we used to call ourselves the three amigos. I was kind of in the middle. I was a mentor to Jim, even though he was my boss. And there was, that was something that JR really, in my own personal conversations with him, he encouraged. He said, how would you like to look after the young fellow, meaning Brad at the time? He was just at the developmental side of his career. And I said, oh my gosh, JR, I'd be honored. And it was an honor to be able to be a part of a family and to have a responsibility, if you will, for the growth and the skills that they would ultimately need as they ascended to the roles like CEO.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I just sensed how important those values were and how aligned they were. And thinking of humility, one of the things that you did that someone might not expect the president of a company to do was you made a commitment to call customers
Mm.
to get their input. And not very many senior leaders, if I had to guess, engage in that kind of interaction with their customers. But what was behind your decision to do that, and what did you learn as a result of that?
Well, I can't take all credit for that because it was really a collaborative. Jim, he never went to sleep, it seemed to me. He was always thinking about how could we be better in terms of creating enduring relationships with our customers. And we talked about, well, one of the ways is to talk to them. And so from those discussions we had, we said, why don't we have each one of our senior people, we'll give them 5 names of new customers that have started with Shaw. They've had a new connection. Why don't we reach out to those customers? And so it started off with Jim and I doing that. And the results were so heartwarming. I mean, you can imagine you've just unpacked all your boxes and you've got this new cable system in there. There was a technician in there yesterday who's done something. And most of the interactions were positive because we were actually giving our customers something. We were giving them television stations and later on in technology, internet. But I would phone up and say, good morning, Mrs. Smith. My name is Peter Bissonnette. I'm the president of Shaw, and we interconnected you to our services yesterday. And I'd really love to know how we did. Was our technician on time? Was he courteous? Or when you were talking to one of our customer service representatives, was there a tone of service that made you feel welcome? And if there wasn't, please just be candid with me. We're trying to be better by doing this. And so this is one way we do it. Oh my God, you're the president? I don't believe it. I said, well, I am and I care. And that's what it's all about. And so we actually documented the calls that we had in terms of what were the key learnings from those calls. And we would meet with our staff to address those kinds of if there were shortfallings. And one of the primary ways that we distinguished ourselves from our competition was in the level of service that we provide our customers. We made a decision not to, for instance, offshore call centers, where the telephone companies were sending their customers to the Philippines or Egypt. We were sending ours to Victoria, Winnipeg, Vancouver, whatever community we served, we had a call center. And so our call center staff understood where the streets were in the street. They understood what teams were playing in those communities. They really were a part of the community, the same community that our customers were. That was hugely important in when a customer called for an emergency, for instance. Oh my God, there's a house burning here on Fifth Avenue and 6th Street. And, we know our staff knew, some of them lived on that street. So it was really a positive link to the community. Another really important aspect of what we did is we had a community channel. And so we actually animated the community on a channel for our customers. And whether it was talking about the local community leadership meetings, anything sort of the politics around the community, some of the main characters that live in the community, that some of the things that they were doing in their lives to make the community a better place to live, those were all animated by us, and we saw that as a unbelievably wonderful differentiator because our competitors were not doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
just things that we could do that, and JR, he loved children, and so he had this teddy bear. I mean, it was the Shaw bears. There was a white bears with little blue things, all in our colors and that. And we would give them to the ambulance services, to the fire engines. Our own technicians carried them. And when there was a child that was in trauma, we would give them those teddy bears, the Shaw bears. And it was amazing the stories that we would get from parents of the children who had received those and the impact it had on them in terms of helping them to manage whatever the trauma was that they were dealing with. My son himself remembers me coming home when he was 4 years old and giving him a Shaw bear, which he still has today. He's 38 years old now. And how important that was to him as a young child. So those were just little vignettes of love that JR would share and would make a part of what our company was all about.
That whole theme of caring is coming through loud and clear with
It
what you
is.
just described. Letting people know we care about you, we care about your experience with us. And I would just challenge my listeners to ask themselves, how could we find out more about what our clients or customers' experience is with our company? Because what you all did provided such valuable information that helped you then make changes that made that experience even richer. And that reminds me of another area I wanted to talk to you about, which is caring about your employees. There were two things. One is using we instead of I, and another is your decision to do these engagement surveys, and where some companies would have been very happy with the results that you got, you all went, wait, there's still too big of a gap. How can we close that? So talk about the engagement, the experiences that you wanted to elevate for your own employees.
Yes, and you're absolutely right, Meredith. The results of that first survey for us were distressing, even though it was sort of in the mid 60s engagement. The person that we were using, they said, that's actually a very good. We said, well, if only 65% of our employees are engaged, that means 35% aren't. So how do we address that? And so we actually sent around a survey. What we were looking for was, first of all, an anonymous, so that nobody felt that they were hanging it out there. And we said, could you please tell us where we could do more to make you feel a part of our company? And this compendium of feedback came back to me. It was a book about this big. And I remember taking it home it was Christmas time. And I remember taking it home and I started reading it and I went, holy doodle, have we got work to do? But everything that was in that book, we could accommodate by doing something to essentially address that concern. Whether it was the way we were communicating, or they would report that sometimes their bosses didn't make them, or their supervisors didn't make them feel welcome. They didn't feel a part of it. They didn't really know why they were doing certain things, and so just sharing goals and sharing results and sharing, I mean, the kind of feedback that reflects on their efforts to do what we do with our customers, whether it was an engineering person designing cable plant to provide more capacity to scale with our customers. I mean, we really looked at the level of the quality of service, the way that we could provide higher speed internet, more channels. Those were all driving forces for our engineers to build plant so that we could accommodate that. Whether it was our IS people, our the IT people, our back office systems were going from kind of simple, because when I started, we only had basically 20 channels, to now very complex when we've had lines of business that were included internet, included telephone service, ultimately cellular. How do we manage those back office systems? So we had, so we were growing and we were bringing on talent that was purposefully there to help us, make those changes. Because much of the feedback we got from our customers also went to their feelings of inadequacy in terms of satisfying customers. So it was, so the feedback loop was fantastic. So we were, as well as we were, caring for the needs of our employees, we were in fact doing the same thing for our customers because they did want to do better. And so, excuse me, we also, as I went through this compendium, I thought my heart actually hurt when I was reading some of the things that we were or weren't doing. And so as a senior management team, we collaborate. We said, this is not good enough. How can we, each of us, take responsibility to address these concerns? And so there was a focus on improving. And the caring aspect was actually one of the values that wasn't listed on a care. When you look at the company values, integrity, customer focus, the thing that I said is, if caring was a value, it underpins all of those. If you care enough to do something for your employees, or if you care enough to do something right for our customers, or if you care enough to do something that actually has a benefit to shareholders, everybody wins in that. And so the power of caring, I think, was that silent kind of, I call it the underpinning value of all values. And that was how I would say we characterized kind of the efforts of the team to do better, if you will, by virtue of our customers.
Yeah. And so what are some of the things you put in place after the senior leadership teams made that commitment? We want to not just improve the score, but do the things that increase the positive experience of our employees. What are some of the things that you actually did that made a difference?
Yes. Well, communications was probably one of the underpinning common kind of threads, if you will, to that feedback. I don't feel that I'm enlightened enough in terms of what we're trying to achieve, what the results are of what we're doing on a real-time basis. So we started having, I won't call them town halls, but we used to bring in all of our senior managers, directors, vice presidents, of which there were by this time around 700, and I would spend 2 hours winging it, frankly. So it wasn't a scripted thing. It would be real life discussions about how we could work more collaboratively as a leadership team. We talked about scotomas, for instance. And scotomas are blind spots. And we said, wouldn't it be wonderful if I, for instance, gave you permission, if something that I was doing was creating a challenge for you working with me, that you have permission to let me know about that. Obviously in a somewhat enlightened way in terms of giving feedback. But wouldn't that be wonderful if each of us in this room had the same psychological contract that when you're working with your supervisors or with each other, that you have permission to provide that kind of feedback? What a wonderful world wouldn't that be? And so just taking tiny little footsteps. I remember talking to them about the negative aspects of pride, when pride gets in the way of what we're really here to do. And so I called it pride, the career killer. And so if we can help each other where there's somebody is exhibiting that, I'll call it that negative side of pride, that you can give them just a little nudge, because we all have these blind spots, and to the extent that we can help each other with those. So that was just one way, but communicating, providing feedback on how we were doing, having smaller team meetings amongst people in the different departments. Different departments didn't understand sometimes why we were doing certain things in the field, what impact it would have on themselves. So sharing information amongst ourselves And some people looked at these meetings as some would say time wasters. No, they weren't. We saw these as critical to becoming better for our customers. Sharing regulatory challenges that we were having. We were a regulated industry, and so we had challenges that came from being regulated, and we would share what we're trying to do about those. In fact, the regulator would actually measure the number of the feedback that they would get from customers, and they would report that across the nation. And it was interesting that Shaw's feedback from customers in terms of reporting incidents was the lowest amongst all of the telecommunications companies. And it didn't just happen, it happened consciously through what our employees, the way that they interrelated with our customers. We had one change, which was a 2-hour window. If you call Shaw within 2 hours, we will service what you need, whether it's a call for service, whether it's a new service, whether it's a service technician showing up at your door, if you have an outage or some kind of impairment to your services. 2-hour windows, and we used to measure that. Those had tremendous impact on our customers and the experiences that they would report to or wouldn't report, frankly, because things were going along pretty well. So those kind of initiatives, which were basically going to, we call them just enduring relationships with customers. They had, when you phoned us, thank you for choosing Shaw. And we said, that's a part of our life. They can choose to come to Shaw, or they can choose not to. They can go somewhere else. So just acknowledging the fact that they had made a choice to come to Shaw. And so even setting the tone, if you will, for conversation, what a wonderful way to do it. And very, very little, small, little subtle kinds of tones of service kinds of elements. In our call centers in Vancouver, for instance, we have a large population of Chinese customers and Asian customers. We actually had call centers that had probably 50% of the call center was made up of Chinese customer service representatives, so they could speak their own language. And that was and when you think about the telephone company who had call centers in Egypt, and a customer would call there and they didn't have a clue what they were doing, et cetera, or you'd call ours and they'd say, Shishe, Shufu, I feel comfortable. How are you doing? The accolades that we got through those kinds of activities were wonderful. They just reinforce the fact that we need to do more and more things that we can. If we can identify it, then we should be able to actually rectify it.
Hearing you describe the systems you put in place and the people you put in place to serve your customers, knowing that in order for people to serve them well, the employees had to feel that same valuing from your leadership team. And it sounds like you really worked consciously and intentionally on putting in place leaders who could convey that same caring to the people on their teams.
Absolutely. It was interesting. I moved from Vancouver to Toronto. We were acquiring cable systems. We hadn't traditionally been Toronto-based kind of customers. So we had bought 3 very large companies in Toronto, and we actually had more employees that were non-Shaw than we had Shaw employees. And so JR and Jim and I had the discussion. We said, rather than me flying back and forth from Toronto to Vancouver or Calgary, where our headquarters were, why don't I just move to Toronto? And then I can be on the ground. If I want to be at a call center at 5 o'clock in the morning, I could be there. So, and it was all about being the ambassador of culture. And so when we were deciding how we would structure our companies, the criteria was mostly about character as opposed to roles and skills. We assumed that people had the skills when we were looking at them. It was all about fit. How would this person promulgate, if you will, the values that are so important to Shaw? And in a year and a half when I was living in Toronto, I got more joy out of what we had created from the staff that existed, because they had this natural it's a kind of a human response to good things. And so when we would talk about treating our employees fairly, Maslow's law was really important. And so those are very simple tenets, but by actually living it and doing it, I have employees that still reach out to me from 30 years ago when I moved to Toronto, and the connections that we made and how important and significant they were in how they felt about being acquired, if you will, by Shaw. I mean, it's a very scary thing when a company acquires you,
Mhm.
but when somebody acquires you, that show from immediately that they care and they want to find the best role for you within their organization, and it also creates opportunities for you to go to many different kinds of corners of our service area. So people would move from Toronto to Vancouver to British Columbia, and so there are opportunities, if you will, to enjoy life, if you will, and in areas that they otherwise would not have had the opportunity to, was really one of those intangible kind of benefits as well. So
Mhm.
there is people that I follow their careers and I reach out to them, and even the employees that when Rogers bought us in 2023, many of those, of course, there were 10,000 employees at the time with Shaw. Now they're under the guidance of Rogers. And I remember writing to Edward Rogers, who's the chairman, saying, I talked about my flock. And I said, these wonderful people at Shaw are now under your care. And I can't say enough good things about them. And that I hope that you embrace them as much as they felt embraced by us. And
Mhm.
he was so wonderful. He loved the fact that we thought of it in the sort of that, again, that underpinning of caring for our employees. Because when you do, you you treat them differently.
Mhm. Oh, you know, as you were talking about, acquiring companies and bringing in new people, it's not unlike somebody being hired. And how does a company onboard a new hire? So you can look at it on a kind of macro level, at the company level, acquiring a company, but also with an individual person coming on board inside of a company for the first time. What kind of impression are they getting? What are they learning about the culture? What did you do at Shaw to
Yes.
help? Well, I'm sure you hired for the character that you're talking about. But when somebody came on board, how did you help them really feel it and experience it?
That's great. We had Shaw U, and so any new employee within a month of their employment were scheduled into Shaw U, which was a month process. And Bill McDonald, who was our senior vice president of HR, he was like the Father John Boschko of the schoolyard, where if you can visualize this, the priest goes out there and all the boys run to them because they really respect him and he treats them with care. So we cared enough that when you came to work with us, we didn't just talk about how you install a cable or how you do this. We wanted them to understand the culture of our company, what our values were, how they actually would impact them in their roles within the company, understanding that the company is made up of so many different cells, if you will, like a honeycomb, and they're all connected to each other, and how important it is that you, the new employee that's coming into Shaw, feel a part of this company. And so Shaw U had a curriculum that touched on all sort of aspects of the business. It talked about J.R. Shaw and the we of a company. And people go, we? I'm used to writing, I did this, I did that, I did that. And we go, well, what we like to do is we like to talk about how we did it. And, this truly is a team, and you're a part of an integral part of our team. And so that was what a welcome kind of what a welcome mat and environment we would create for our employees. And then they would have an opportunity then to quite quickly bridge that gap, if you will, the cultural gap that they may have had when they came in to what was important to us. And we were never shy. None of us were shy about kind of evoking what was important to us. I mean, JR, he used to get notes from people, a memo from a certain person, and he would circle the I's and he would send it back and say, let's chat. And and when you get a let's chat, I was, from the chairman of the company, the founder of the company, it really told you how serious we were about the whole aspect of the team. And when I think about the feedback that we receive, even informally now, when I look at LinkedIn, and I, I mean, I can name people that I used to love to mentor women in the workplace, and how they and provide them with the same opportunity that all of the men were getting in terms of their career development. And I can count on two of my hands here that some of the people that we were able to really help along the way, who are now, like, one of them is right now as a president of small and medium business at the telephone company. That's a huge position, and she's there. And when I look at some of the communications that she is imparting on those people, those are all the values that we all
Mhm.
they naturally kind of occur within ourselves. And I see another lady, Nicole, who's now the chairman and the CEO of her company, a small IT company that now has contracts in Australia and the US for design of very, very sophisticated network devices. She started off as a customer service manager. So it's tremendously rewarding for me to look at where our colleagues where are they making a difference, and they
Mhm.
are significant. So and so when I see somebody has achieved something on LinkedIn in another aspect, I love to write them a note, and it's just, I care, and we shared a certain time in our lives, but you're off doing what you're doing now. But I want you to know how important it is, and how gratified we feel for your success.
Mhm. That's so wonderful. Yeah, because not only did, just kind of summarize, not only did they learn it while they were there, it became a part of who they were and who
Yes.
they are. And so they bring that, so that the ripple effect just continues. Talk about legacy. That's
Yeah.
so powerful, because it's impossible to estimate how many hundreds and thousands of people are benefiting from the culture that was created there early on and then continued to grow and learn. One final thing, Peter, because I know we're getting close to time. One of the words that's used a lot these days about leaders is the need to be vulnerable. And you don't talk specifically about that word so much, but you illustrate it in so many examples of things that you did where you would sit down and just talk openly to people or own behaviors that you had done. How did you learn to become more vulnerable? And what does it mean to you for a leader to be vulnerable?
Well, I think I learned it. Well, when I was in the monastery, every week, the monks, and these were monks that had a vow of stability, so they were going to live and die in that monastery. They used to have these sessions where they would talk about their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, and it was almost, I won't call it flagellation, but they were being vulnerable in front of their colleagues in a way that had an impact on me. Like, how do you, for instance, my financial background in terms of understanding finance, that was an area I needed to focus on. I was a good technical person. I understood, operations. And so when we were tasked with reviewing $5 billion budgets for the whole company, I remember how important it was that the financial people in the company understood that they could actually teach me to be better than I was. And so I have to say, I am vulnerable in terms of I need some work. I need some support from you in understanding how all of these numbers fit together in terms of, and how they translate into the real business and lines of business, and the wherewithal that we have in terms of having the expenses and the capital benefits and all of the other things that justify having these kinds of expenses. But it really it was for me looking for that one positive thing about a financial person, but also
Hmm.
letting them know that we really do need and can learn from you. And so humility is a part of vulnerability as well.
Mhm.
And so an ego is also part of the humility. How do we manage the ego? How do we be vulnerable? And by showing that, I guess the monks used to say, I'm not perfect. How can I, they used to say, tune myself like Jesus, become more like Jesus. And so if it's important to you that if you first of all sort of in self-realization, where do I need to work? I used to be a poor listener, and how do I improve my listening skills? So 80% and 10 or 20% as opposed to the opposite. And how do I, for instance, I would say to them, am I being too controlling now? Because I'm a type A person. And how do I make sure that I can delegate and not overmanage? But if I do, please help me to understand that, because sometimes the passion of what's going on might blind me to the energy that I'm exhibiting as we're dealing with. So being vulnerable to being, frankly, honest about where I need to have the kind of help that I do as a leader with those people that are also leaders, and model their behavior in a way that they can also see, wow, that's a way that we could be more effective by being
Mhm.
just more honest with each other and helping each other. It was like we talked about the light. Some companies, our company is to pride itself on being advocates for each other. So in the leadership team, we would share information. Nobody felt, that information control was actually a good thing, because it was, JR recognized all of the sort of good qualities of people. And one of them was sharing, having the humility to share in a way that encouraged, frankly, the kind of relationships that go on in senior leadership, applauding when somebody does something great, not holding back and thinking, oh, they're
Mhm.
going to look better than I do. We used to call it running to the light. And, people that run to the light get bumps on their heads. But if you're sharing the light, all of us benefit from that. And so it creates, uh, I, I came from a large family, so it creates equality, if you will, as well within the family, equality in terms of being recognized and trusting that you are being recognized, because trusting in your leaders is an important aspect. And I used to say to our leaders that if my motives for leading you are in line with your motives for following me, that we have, so this isn't all about me self-importance. It's about actually trying to achieve something. And
Mhm.
we achieve it together as a team. You have certain things that you have to do, and I have certain things that I have to do, but we do achieve it as a team. And so those are all sort of vulnerabilities. Our vulnerabilities kind of help us to get to those places where we don't feel uncomfortable being vulnerable. It's not a weakness, it's a strength.
Mhm. So well said. And I love this idea of shining the light on others, being generous, having that spirit of generosity, of caring again, but that generosity of seeing the best in others, giving them credit, not feeling like you've got to hoard this. I love that image of running into the light and bumping your head. It's such a good one, because I think each of us could ask ourselves that in any given moment when we're interacting with someone on our team or a customer or a loved one. Am I
Yes, very much
shining the
so.
light on this person, or am I running into the light? And what impact is this having on our relationship? Peter, I could talk to you for such a long time. You are such a wealth of wisdom based on your experience. And I want to encourage all of my listeners to get a copy of Count on Me, your stories of your personal life and also your professional life. The lessons that are woven through it are just such a rich resource. Please share with my audience how they can connect with you, get a copy of your book, and learn more
Yeah.
about you.
Well, Count on Me is available now as a hard copy, as a paperback, as a digital copy. And last 2 weeks ago, my audiobook, which I narrated, is
Oh,
also now available.
wonderful.
So if you want to listen to this voice talking to you about, that whole story, it's available through Amazon, Ingenium Books, which is our publisher, Indigo Books, Chapters, all of those bookstores will also have it. even in my local community here in Kelowna, Mosaic Books has the book. I was really heart warmed that in the other day there was a lady that is renowned for reading books, and she put my book on her August must-read list. So I went, holy doodle! It's nice when people know you are reading your book, but when somebody doesn't know you and they still have that same kind of, because there are things that resonate. So and my Peter Bissonnette I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and of course I'm actually creating a website that the other aspects of what we've done in economy can be shared, whether it's pictures or the like, on my website. So that's a process that's in place right now as well.
Well, great. We'll be able to add that to your show notes page when
Yeah.
it's ready. So people will be able to find that. Peter, thank you so much. Thank you for the leader you were at Shaw and all the other places where you were able to touch so many lives, and for who you are. I said this at the opening. You are a remarkable human being. And
Oh
I'm
gosh.
so delighted that you were able to be with me today and share your experiences and your hard-earned wisdom
Well,
with my
Meredith,
audience.
I feel so blessed, frankly, to have been on your show, because I really have. I've watched you and I thought, wow, this is a person that does have a wealth, and I can feel somewhat intimidated by it, but I'm actually encouraged by it as well, is that we can relate on so many different levels in terms of experiences as leaders. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out the powerful tools we've created to help leaders strengthen their character and communication skills. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.